So we'll get started. It's 2:01. Thanks everyone for joining us for this webinar today. We have a solid crowd here, which is really exciting. This webinar is on project evaluation, and we'll hear from John Beck in just a couple minutes. For those of you who don't know, this webinar is part of a series that we put on here in the Chesapeake Bay region through the NOAA Chesapeake Bay Office and the Chesapeake Bay Program to support MWEE practitioners. So this is for both formal and non-formal educators, and we're trying to build some capacity around implementing and designing MWEEs. So I think I know a lot of people on this call already, but just in case I don't, my name's Elise Trelligan. I coordinate the BWET program here in Chesapeake. On this call, you'll also meet some of my colleagues, Krista, Bart, Shannon, and of course, John. Later in this breakout session, you'll also have a chance to interact with a couple of them too. Just a few housekeeping items before we get started. I know everyone's probably teleworking, or hopefully you are. There can be a number of distractions going on behind us over the next hour, so I do ask that you try to keep yourself on mute throughout the course of this webinar. We're hoping that you're already on mute, but in case you're not, you can just adjust that dial in your participant log there. There's a red mute button that shows when you're actually on mute, and I will manually mute you if there becomes an issue. John, who I'll introduce in a moment, will be presenting for about 35 minutes today. You might have questions that bubble up. Feel free to document those right in the chat or scribble them down. We're going to have a chance to answer all questions at the end today. At the end of the presentation, we're going to be going into some breakout groups to briefly discuss how you're approaching project evaluation yourself. And to talk about how maybe your thinking has shifted a little bit over the course of the presentation. We'll also have a chance to come up with some group questions that we have to address any maybe misconceptions that we have presently, or give John some other questions to throw at him. But just recognizing that this is a huge topic and we're really just taking a pretty small bite out of something that's really big. So during those breakout sessions, that will be your chance to turn your video on, to unmute yourself, and to really dig into a little discussion. Right now, you can shut your video off. It just helps with the streaming quality to make sure that everybody is able to see this and hear this, hopefully without any technical difficulties. During the breakout groups, we encourage that dialogue. We hope that everybody will have a chance to speak a little bit and to share. We also encourage you to share contact information during that as well. One other piece of housekeeping is that we are recording this webinar. For those of you who are familiar with this series, we have all these webinars archived in a Google folder, which has already been shared with you via the email that you should have got as an invitation to this. If you don't have access to that, feel free to send me an email, which I will put in the chat in just a couple of minutes, and I can give you access to that as well. These webinars are free. They're available for you to share. So if you have other colleagues that you think would be interested in this, feel free to extend these as well. With that, let's move on to our official business. So John Beck is the Senior Program Evaluator for the NOAA Office of Education. He so graciously partnered with us actually on a workshop that we hosted at the Environmental Science Training Center this past December. And this spurred a lot of interesting conversations, and we heard from a lot of folks that this is something that we were interested in bringing into this webinar space. So like I said, this is going to be a small bite, about 35-minute presentation. He has so much to share. John's an amazing individual. We're so lucky to have him here today. So with that, I will let John take it away. John, you can feel free to share your screen now, and I'm going to shut my video off.
Stop my video. Thanks, Elise. Well, okay, and then this. Okay, thanks. Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us. Really exciting. We have a lot of people on. So yeah, there's a lot to cover, and I'll probably go pretty fast. So you know, as questions come up, please you know, use the chat box, and hopefully we'll have some opportunities to you know, address them later on in the second half of the session. So so as an internal evaluator, I work with programs across NOAA for our community in terms of providing evaluation support, including things like evaluation trainings like this. One thing that, and I've kind of given a version of this training now, about three or four times at this point. So this is, you're getting a kind of more refined version, and kind of where I've kind of gone with this training is kind of focusing on this thing called evaluative thinking. So let's get into, before I define that, it is a jargon term, but there is a reason for that, like in any kind of discipline. But before that, you know, we need to know why, you know, like what's kind of the to feel the problem here. And so I really like this quote. I think it really gets at kind of, for me, like why this is important. You know, it is possible to evaluate without evaluative thinking, but to do so is often painful and pointless. So, you know, I work with a lot of folks, and, you know, people talk about just evaluation as this thing you do without really having any kind of thought as to why you're doing it, what you hope to get out of it, you know, whether it's working for you or not. And it's all those other, it's that other thing that makes the value of the evaluation, not just as much as doing the evaluation well in terms of its kind of technical qualities. So that's really the piece that I think, you know, we have some folks from all sectors of education here today, higher ed and K-12 and informal. So, you know, we're not, and maybe everybody's connected with kind of environmental ed and maybe watershed education, but, you know, we all have other, you know, we're full-time educators. So, you know, that kind of thinking process, as you know, when you're working with your own students and learners, you know, that is what we're really trying to shape here. So in that same regard, that's kind of what I'm hoping to do with you guys in terms of evaluation. So I kind of cobbled together a definition so that way we have something to work off of here. So, you know, there's not a kind of a consensus definition on evaluative thinking. This is still very much kind of a topic of, you know, discussion in our profession. But I think this covers at least what I, you know, kind of the elements that I'm thinking about when I use the term. So it's the monitoring and directing the processes of evaluation, where one identifies assumptions, poses thoughtful questions, pursues deeper understanding through reflection and perspective taking, and makes informed decisions in preparation for action. You know, in this definition, what you don't see at all is data. You don't see analysis. You don't see surveys. You know, those are all the kind of technical qualities we really care about. But, you know, again, you know, what question are we trying to answer? What assumptions are we making about the things that we're looking at? What are we learning from this? And, you know, how are we going to use this information? These are all the kind of broader questions about, again, the value, I think, of why we're doing the evaluation. So, in this presentation, because we had to cut it back a little bit, we're going to cover this kind of, as you see on the right side, these 6 pieces here of kind of, I wouldn't call them steps because they don't necessarily build upon each other, but and they all don't have to be in the same order, but I'll present them in this order around planning for an evaluation. You know, the evaluand, the background and context, purpose and goals, evaluation questions, scheduling, logistics, and budget. And all of those things don't require any kind of specific background in evaluation. We're not talking about any kind of design elements. We're not talking about specific measurement or anything like that. Those start to get introduced in the kind of second phase here in terms of criteria, collection, analysis, you know, report writing as a deliverable. We're not going to cover those today, but understand that there's that separation about, you know, no matter what, whether you're doing the evaluation, whether you're working with somebody externally, you should be able to answer, you know, really address all of these things here in this first 6 components here of an evaluation plan. So, you know, when I'm talking about planning, you know, it's being able to explain what you want to evaluate. You can explain why it's important, and you have an idea about what you want to do with that information. And obviously planning is probably most important at the beginning, but these are all things that will move around on you and evolve and might change midstream during the course of an evaluation. So these are things that you need to be able to kind of revisit throughout the process here. So these are very general skills. So the other big evaluation jargony term that I'm going to introduce is the evaluand. Not all evaluators use this term just because it is pretty like an obscure term, but I think most are aware of this term. And very simply, it's what is being evaluated. It's the object of study. And most times that can seem fairly trivial, but you know, the more we look at it, the more we're trying to define what we want to get out of the study. You know, that can be, it may be that we're too narrow, or it may be that we're too broad. And so it really kind of keeping an eye out for what it is that we're really wanting to look at here, and trying to kind of cut away anything that is somewhat extraneous. The more you're able to do that, the more you're really able to define the boundaries of what it is that you want to look at. About these programs are you know, they have people, they have their systems and organizations, they live in communities. Those boundaries are not well defined many times. So it's hard, you know, from an evaluation perspective to kind of keep things bounded. But the more you're able to have some clarity on that, the more you're really going to be able to kind of narrow the focus, keep your evaluation focus. Because you're just, you know, in the many times I've given this presentation, you know, the core audience it's typically people who are doing the evaluation themselves. So, you know, so we can only afford to, you know, if this is the if this is the 12th thing you're doing on top of the 11 other things you're doing, there's, you know, you're not gonna be able to do a full evaluation. You're not a full-time evaluator. So let's really answer what it is that we really need to know here. And you know, making sure we understand what it is that we're studying helps us do that. You know, in a lot of the discussions I've had with folks, you know, it can really vary in terms of what it is that people want to look at in terms of the evaluand here. You know, you may be the one running your field trip and you have some kind of assessment piece and a survey thing, and you want to be able to measure how effective it is. And that's very challenging. We'll get into that a little bit. Or, you know, scaling up from that, you know, maybe you're looking at your kind of MWEE as you're kind of dropping in on classes, and you're working with maybe a classroom group of students 3 different times, maybe over 3 days or maybe over 3 months. But, you know, you have more kind of contact time there. We also know, you know, we're obviously, this is a MWEE focused kind of session. So we might think about, we also understand that sometimes those MWEEs are not really separated, but they're well integrated into the curriculum to the point where we can really, it really becomes very hard to distinguish whether it's just regular curriculum or it's the MWEE itself. And then we might be looking at broader things like student outcomes, environmental literacy, and then maybe even broader than that, you know, most of us are in environmental ed, and you know, thinking about, you know, environmental outcomes as well as a result of these efforts. So you can imagine, you know, if we're wanting to evaluate the effectiveness of a field trip compared to what outcome, right? And so let's say a field trip relative to student outcomes. Well, that's pretty challenging. And then, you know, maybe relative to environmental outcomes. Well, you know, there's a lot that has to go on. There's a lot of things that, you know, so let's understand the scale at which we're really looking at that evaluand is very important. And then that understanding kind of that level will allow us to do other things. But before we do that, we have a poll question. We didn't test it. Oh, there we go. I'm just curious we have a lot of people on, and if you don't mind, just and it may not be these specific things, but hopefully you'll be able to get a sense of the scale here and choose the scale that is most appropriate for the kind of thing that you're looking at, that you want to evaluate here. And I did make it, we made it like just one level. Obviously you might be looking at multiple things and things like that, but just, just to get a general sense of where everybody is at and what people are interested in is helpful. Maybe we'll give about.
So I just want to, John, I want to make sure everybody can see the poll that is up on the screen right now. You can choose one of which level of evaluand are you looking at. Yeah. And apologies for the spelling error in that.
Oh yeah, we get it.
And if somebody can just confirm that they can in fact see it, because I am not seeing any results come through.
Okay, maybe
thank you, Jen.
I think it's starting to.
Okay, perfect.
What is that? Are we, Elise, are we going to be able to see the results? Oh, there we go.
Yes.
All right. Yep, that'll do.
Can you see them?
I can see them. They should be on everybody's screen then, if I can see them, right?
Yeah, I think I have a different view. I apologize. Mine
okay.
are all coming out at 0% for some reason.
Interesting. Okay. Can everybody see the? I don't know. So most people are looking at, the highest is more at that kind of field trip level, and then kind of the more integrated MWEE curricular level. We're kind of the two top. That gets us to that gets us over 50%. So that's great. Let's see if I can move on. Okay. And so what I've come to come to understand is kind of what's possible at these different levels of scale here. And so I make this distinction between assessing the objectives of the evaluand and assessing the outcomes of the evaluand. So I define objectives here as the objectives of instruction are the expectations that students will be able to perform the activity without support and without error as a result of instruction. So you're doing this to the point where they can achieve, they can perform what it is that you just, you've given them instruction to do. And then I make a distinction with that versus outcomes. Outcomes of education, I use education versus instruction here, are the expectations that student ability levels will improve as a result of instruction over an extended period of time, weeks, months, years. So, just from a kind of learning sciences perspective, student abilities, learning takes place over time. And so while someone might be able to perform something relatively flawlessly at one point, that there is a forgetting curve that is in place. And so without kind of reinforcement, without other opportunities to practice and integrate that knowledge, that we'll start to see those ability levels change over time. So if we're really looking for that kind of, and also it's outcomes in terms of where they start, where they're coming in, and where they kind of end up. And so not everybody's at the same starting place in terms of what it is that you may be teaching. So they may already have mastered that objective, coming in, when we call that a ceiling effect. But that doesn't mean that, they can't have outcomes as well, right? Their ability levels could improve with, maybe, again, differentiated instruction. So I know that's a bit bit of an arcane distinction maybe, but so in terms of what's valuable, I think, you know, what we have a lot of folks who are interested at that kind of field trip instructional level. And, you know, in terms of, you know, time that we have them, whether you have them for 1 hour to 1 day, probably what's a reasonable expectation, because, you know, 3 hours, even 3 hours is not a huge amount of time. Many of you, particularly maybe in informal settings, you know, there's a lot of logistics involved in that 3 hours as well. So, you know, assessing outcomes is just relative, is not really a reasonable expectation. Neither is it that you're really going to be able to change ability levels in that period of time, but also to having the capacity to measure those outcomes when they begin and end in that shorter period of time is also unreasonable. So the more you're able to kind of document, you know, what students are able to do as a result of your instruction with them, you know, and how well they're able to meet those objectives, that's really kind of a bar that I think is more reasonable and should tell you a lot of information about what's working and what's not about your instruction. And then as we have more time and as we're looking at broader outcomes, you know, let's look at more of that curricular level. Maybe we're looking at a course. So we have students for, you know, maybe, you know, 180 days over the course of a year. You know, yes, we have the objectives that we do want to make sure that our instruction is the students are able to perform what it is that we're asking them to do, but we want to balance that to see change over time as well. We want to see those ability, you know, being able to, and obviously one feeds the other in that regard. So as they're able to perform more complicated and more complex tasks as you lay them out for them, you know, they're starting to ask good questions. They're starting to think about collecting data that helps them answer questions. They're analyzing, interpreting that data. We're layering on those kinds of activities. You know, we want to also be able to see, we want those ability levels to change over time, no matter what level they're coming in with us at. And we want to see that change over time. So we want to, you know, balance those kinds of things when it comes to looking at that level. And these are general rules of thumb. I wouldn't say, I kind of just did this, you know, and that's going to vary based on your specific circumstances. But just to kind of balance out, you know, these kind of broader outcomes around student outcomes, I'm talking about, you know, in this case, I'm talking about schooling, you know, maybe their years in middle school. We're talking about, you know, multiple courses. We're talking multiple teachers. We're talking a phase of their adolescent development. Certainly, you know, their instruction is important, but also we want to make sure that they're out, you know, we're seeing that change and their development over time. So hopefully the point here that I'm able to kind of make is kind of the nearer term, the shorter term to instruction, the closer we're really wanting to look at performance, and then using that performance to inform our instruction. And then the farther out we're getting, the broader we're getting, the multiple things that are going into a full education, you know, we're relying less on those objectives. You know, the component that measuring all of the objectives ultimately still doesn't get us to outcomes. We want to be able to look at, you know, people, these are, you know, human beings, they're full people, they bring their whole experience. So we really need to look at those things, you know, for those individuals. So, so kind of shifting the balance there as we look at these kind of broader things and multiple systems that we're really engaging with. Another thing that I want to mention here is, you know, as you're developing, you know, if you've got you know, a kind of instruction that's not very cognitively challenging, you know, filling out a worksheet, for instance, well, you know, that's really not giving you a lot of data. It's not giving you good good data, it's not good assessment, but also it's because you're not really demanding anything, and the performance that you're expecting of them is to fill in a worksheet. So as as you raise the bar on your instruction, you're asking for arguments. You're asking them to use a model to explain what's happening. These are pulled from basically resources on supporting the next generation science standards. As we're looking and really expecting higher levels of outcomes of students, we're also needing to match that with our instruction. And then the more they're able to demonstrate that and perform these things, we'll have evidence of that in students as well. So, so the more you're improving your instruction, more students are able to do, and then the better outcomes we're ultimately going to be able to see over time. So that's the evaluand piece, and understanding kind of where we are in the scale, you know, looking at which scale, and looking at you know, what's kind of what level where what's reasonable in terms of evaluation. But there's other components. We can have the perfect program, you know, might be well designed, you've run it a million times, but things like context, you know, as we're seeing right now, if the context changes, the program didn't change, the context changed, the outcomes will change. So, and now this is a kind of current events are an extreme version of that, but that just makes it easier to see. But that happens that's operating at all times. And so really investigating the history of the program and of the organization that's, you know, maybe running it. All of these things shape how the program operates and what's maybe allowable in terms of maybe changes and improvements. Also relative to that is the background and context of this program in terms of evaluation. You know, has it never done evaluation before, or is this like the 10th one you've done and we're doing the same thing over and over again? All of these things help shape our understanding of what kind of evaluation is going to be very effective here, and what do we want to know? Should we have already known it? Do we already know what the answer is? And you know, even if we do have that answer, how might that inform, you know, what kinds of decisions and actions we can take later on? So context, you know, plays out in a lot of different ways. These are kind of taken from an evaluation group around kind of more international development, but, you know, obviously economics, politics, policy, all of these things, who you're partnering with, as the natural environment is changing, all of these things shape, you know, why an evaluation is important, why the program is important, whether changes are going to be meaningful. So there's a lot going on in terms of, you know, you don't want to go too overboard, but you want to understand that, again, setting and context can drive outcomes and the disparity in those outcomes, particularly for you know, people who historically do see those disparities, particularly in STEM outcomes. And those are not oftentimes driven by outside context, not so much, and social factors, not so much the program design itself. And another aspect of the program is understanding how the program, the program design, life maturity, and where it is in its life cycle interact with, shape the evaluation design itself, and what's possible and what questions we can ask. You know, maybe the planning, at the planning phase, you're not there's no program to evaluate, but you're evaluating the idea of that program. Do people even want or need that idea? And if they did, what would they say? You know, again, that perspective taking. What do they want out of a program like this? Piloting, we get into feasibility. Are there things that were components that are confusing? or complicated because we're kind of designing it for ourselves, and then we introduce it to the world, and all of a sudden, we need rapid, rapid cycles of data collection and design changes. Development is a stage where the program, varies a little bit. It, depending on who's running it, it would be different. And so we might want to look at that, how is the program being implemented? Let's look at not the program itself, but how it's being run. We want to understand that because how it's being run shapes its outcomes. Or maybe we want to know, we want to try something different in terms of variation, and we want to compare it against our existing practices. Many programs stay in development. They never really evolve into something that's more mature. And maturity for me is, that no matter systems run the program. And so somebody leaves, it's still the same. Somebody else runs it, still the same. The organization may, may go in a different direction, but if they're still committed to running the program, it should still be the same. It's systematized, it's documented, it's a mature program that exists in the world. And so we're looking at that point outcomes. We want to be able to really we can because we have an idea of what the program is, and outcomes become even more important in that regard. And then, if you might be going to scaling, that might be a situation where, now you have to change that mature program. You're trying to scale a singular mature program across a region. Well, communities are different. Now you're kind of back in that development mode, but at scale at this point. So all of these things, we're looking at different questions. We're thinking about the evaluand differently, and they all interact with kind of where this program is within this life cycle of its development, the audience, the organization, and the community. So second poll question, in terms of life cycle stage, which one, in terms of, and I know many of you are running multiple programs, and but you probably had a singular program in mind, in terms of thinking about your evaluation today. So I'd be curious to know kind of what resonates with you. And
Five more seconds to respond to that poll, and then I'll end it so we can check out the results. And John, I know some folks who have different versions of Zoom may or may not be able to see the results. So if you don't mind summarizing them quickly.
Yep. Great, thank you.
And they should pop up now.
Okay. There it is. So we had 41% are at that development stage. That's the top response. And then 23% at maturity. So we're talking about, what we would consider kind of basic program evaluation, project and program evaluation. So kind of that's helpful. Thank you, everybody. Okay, so let's move on. So moving on to kind of purpose and goals, again, asking yourself, what do you hope to gain? What's this evaluation supposed to accomplish here? So there should be a broader aim for this in terms of what you hope to accomplish. It's not just to do the evaluation, but the evaluation should feed into something broader around changing the program, or changing something that's supposed to make people's lives better, right? So I highlighted here, there's 14, different goals that I pulled from a kind of a more of a government level evaluation policy. But But I really like how they break out some of these, not just like, the traditional evaluation goals are accountability and learning. And that's pretty broad. I think these are more narrow and help kind of break out like the different kinds of goals that you might be thinking about in terms of your program evaluation. And then I highlighted the ones that I think evaluative thinking are kind of really well suited here in terms of, again, thinking about program and policy, providing feedback. We all have bosses, and we're trying to inform them about, what's working and what's not. Also thinking about, should we be changing this program? Should we be expanding this program? Should we be closing out this program? You know, in terms of implementation, what's working and what's not. That should be a constant, really like driver of things. Nothing's perfect out there. And then, even just thinking about, this program's been around for 14 years. Is it still relevant? Is it still resonating with people? Is it as effective as it could be? We haven't changed it. We have been into maturity for a while. And maybe, the world changes as well. The context changes, kids change. So, maybe shifting back into a development mode for a time. These are all things that you want to kind of think about in terms of, thinking about your program and what's working, what's not. Being clear on what your goals are helps you understand whether you're getting, kind of go into, helps you understand whether you have the right questions in mind. So evaluation questions are very broad questions, and they're really the big answers that you're looking for. I make a distinction between evaluation and research or analysis questions. So research question might be a very, one aligned with one analysis, one data set, but we might be cobbling together information about, observations we made during the instruction. We're looking at student work and maybe a quick survey. And we want to evaluate that as holistically. We might have specific analysis questions for each of those three data sets, but our evaluation question still is the same for across all of those things. So what I've done is align the evaluands, thinking about evaluands versus the types of questions that we might ask. And so if we look from the top row left to right, I go from kind of again at that more objective level, more design of the MWEE itself, to more broader outcomes. And so what is our MWEE designed to do? So do we have a clear idea of what our objectives are, and are they meeting those objectives? And then does the MWEE fit? So in this case, what I mean there is, again, going back to context and relevance. Is it relevant for teachers? Is it relevant for students? Is it, are you delivering a coastal program to an inland community without any modification? At that point, it's not as coherent, right? It might be very good, it might be very effective, but you take it out of context and now it's not effective. And then going back, are you meeting the objectives of the program? Are you achieving the outcomes that were expected? And then getting into broader things around, was it worth it? Kind of, again, the people's perceived values of going through this effort. We might have good outcomes, but people don't actually find the effort worth the relative outcome there. It's just too much work, maybe. And what might be too much work to somebody is hugely valuable to a student. And so all of these values, conflict with each other at times. So, that's a very tricky question to think about in terms of an evaluation, but very, very important, because now we're really looking at it from multiple perspectives. And then, will the benefits of the MWEE last? And so we're looking at things like sustainability. A program you might be developing, the funding goes away, and then the program goes away. Well, it didn't get built to last. And so is it really, at that point, was it worth it? So maybe worth it to the grant, to whoever received the grant, but maybe, that kind of churn in the curriculum might not be worth it. So, this kind of question might be really challenging, what it is that is of value here. So it's just different ways to think about, and then each of these bubbles here would be, could be their own full evaluation study in of itself. I wouldn't try to do all of these things, and all of these things wouldn't apply in every context, but just as a way of kind of more, presenting these questions with what we want to look at, in a concise way is really what I'm trying to achieve here. And so, again, I think this is the last poll question we have. Which of these questions, my guess is relative to the original scale question we asked, because the top answers were field trip level, and then the curricular level, I guess, would be objectives and outcomes. But I'd be curious what happens.
Give 10 more seconds to put in your answers for this poll.
Oh, I'm running way over. Okay, so.
That's okay, John. It's all good. All right. And if you could summarize the results again, that would be great.
Yeah. Okay, yeah, objectives and 55%, and then the outcomes 27%. That's, yeah, okay. Okay, and then, so I'm gonna try to move. Yeah, I can move through these things. And then in terms of scheduling logistics, these are the more pragmatic pieces. When do you need answers? If you need an answer to inform, let's say you're doing a year-long program, and you spend the whole summer analyzing data, well, those answers are not going to be ready before the next school year. So in terms of notes, timing, you might need something more formative in that scenario, before the end of the grant or before the end of the school year, so you can inform design decisions. And then also, who are you trying to inform yourself? Are you trying to, the kinds of information you might need for yourself would be different than, let's say sharing that information with your board or with your leadership. And so the level of rigor might also be different in that scenario. So understanding who your audience is for the information. The key point here is, imagine these 5 boxes as one unit of time each. I have collection of data as 1 out of 5. Spend as much time as you are planning it as you are collecting it. Oftentimes we spend way too much time collecting data. That leaves us little time to analyze it and a little time to use it. Budget, ultimately, sometimes this might be the first question you want to really address. If you have nothing to spend, you might have 0 budget. That's typically what I deal a lot with. But, oftentimes you have in-kind resources. You'd be surprised how much you really do have available. But also, understand that evaluation in terms of your staff time should be above and beyond what they're already doing. It's not just you don't get a 2-for-1 magically there. You should approach, if you're going to spend time collecting data with participants, you're going to have to cut that out of your programming to make sure you're getting the kind of data you want. I'm going to skip this for now. I'll skip this and I'll just jump to this. This is my last slide. You know, a good project evaluation reports not just on what data was collected, but interpretations of quality. So it's a report is not just a bunch of data tables and graphs, but interpretations of what's good, what's bad, what didn't work. You should spend as much time on planning the study and informing the use, and then aligning the study with where the program and our organization are right now, not, you know, not where it used to be or where it will be. That's it for me. I'm sorry I ran over, but you know, there's a lot to cover, so I'll hand it over to Elise.
Thank you so much, John. And no apologies for going over. This is a huge topic, like we said, so this is really fantastic. That being said, we do want to be mindful of everyone's time. We have just a little over 10 minutes left for what we had scheduled. So I think instead of going into breakout groups, I'd like to start with just if anybody has any questions just to start with, feel free to type those into the chat right now. Yes, I will send out the PowerPoint and the link to the Google folder, which has both the PowerPoint and the recording of this webinar. Everybody should already have access to that. If you don't, I will put my email address rather, in the chat at the end here. But for now, if anybody has any questions on program evaluation, we see some coming in. Mary Stapleton asks, our project is primarily focused on teacher professional learning with the obvious goal of eventually impacting students through increased teacher capacity. Is there value in us trying to evaluate their students? For example, having our teachers give pre and post surveys out in their classroom, since our project isn't directly focused on students? Or if resources are limited, would it be better to focus our efforts on how we're impacting teachers? I think this is a great question because I think a lot of folks who are on the line right now are working with teachers and doing professional learning. So John, what do you think about that?
Yeah, no, great question. So obviously the overly broad question is both are important. You know, how do you know your professional development's working if you don't have student outcome data? So that's ideal, but obviously, you know, given decision making under limitations, I would focus on kind of your efforts around teacher, you know, teacher change. So that's where you have your sphere of control. That's what you're going to improve on, and then, you know, you're kind of relying on the better you're doing. You know, you're relying on, you know, that improving student outcomes as well. If you can incorporate teachers sharing their work with students, their students' work back into, you know, if you're working with teachers over a long period of time, there may be ways to kind of lump those things together. But, you know, that's kind of the quick answer on that one.
Other questions that we're getting are examples of surveys, so maybe instruments for teacher evaluation or student evaluation, it looks like. Do you have any recommendations for that, John?
It depends. What I need to know more specifics on what it is that you're wanting to look at and measure. So I don't have any. I don't really have any easy answers there. Sorry.
What recommendations might you give folks who are trying to design instruments for teachers and students? Like, are there any, like, what would you say your hot take is for like 3 recommendations?
Yeah. I mean, just what are your goals and objectives? And then, so when let's say when you're surveying a teacher, understand that you're asking them to self-report on their perceptions and experiences of that, you know, let's say a workshop. You know, that's not a full measure of all the things that you could measure about that workshop, right? That's just, obviously that's an important piece. And they're seeing it from their lens. So, you know, to what extent did they feel like, you know, the objectives you laid out, did they feel like they have met them, have changed in any way. They can evaluate how well you did in facilitating those experiences. Those are all kind of things that, kind of bigger questions you can ask, and then you can kind of construct your questions based on that.
And Kelly seems to be asking specifically around the idea of teachers' understanding of the MWEE framework, perhaps, and maybe how closely they are implementing that to like this model that we, throw out.
I haven't looked at it in a while, but the BWET National Program has an evaluation system. There is a MWEE survey. I don't know if it's exactly would measure their understanding of the MWEE, but I think it would be a good starting point I would try to build off of that existing instrument that is on the BWET website.
And I'll just throw in another resource that I think could be helpful is the audit tool, which is in the back of the MWEE guide. And this helps, it's really a self-assessment to try to see how close you are in, getting towards some of those supporting practices and essential elements. So I would also recommend taking a look at that. That could be used in a variety of different ways as well.
Right.
Molly asks, what are some examples of in-kind resources? And I think that was kind of towards the end of your slides, John.
Yeah, that might be it might just be, do you have a SurveyMonkey account? It might be, because that costs real money if you don't have one, right? Or it might be, maybe you work at a university and there is a survey and research, support center, or colleague in the School of Education. It may be that you work in a school system and you can leverage, student data. It may be that you work at a, informal institution, and maybe there is, like something like NISENet that you can connect with, and where there are evaluators to ask questions, more general questions and things like that. So there's a lot out there that can help support an evaluation that ultimately, costs money, but wouldn't cost you money.
And Anne, thanks for reiterating that sample surveys would be awesome. We are doing some thinking around this in the BWET world right now. So potentially, this is something we're thinking about, but it is really challenging just knowing that everybody's programs are so different. But this is something that we're looking to compile. And there are a couple of resources that we'll send out after this webinar that we can share with you. Grace has a great question. This is very relevant given the situation right now. So this year has significantly or severely impacted our outcomes and touch points with teachers and students. Would you still recommend deploying our end of the year program evaluation with school not being in session? They work throughout the country, or should they just totally call that off? And thinking, is this going to be quality data or not? I think that's really the question here.
That's so the value end here is really going to be both, your interactions with students and teachers, as well as the outcomes as a result of those interactions. Obviously, those have, your program model is based on, has changed as a result of events. So it depends, I guess, is that I would try to collect information, but I would modify the instrument if I could. I would say, like basically what were you still able to do? Basically your value end has changed. So, I would say if you deploy it as it was previously designed, it will not measure and you already know that. So I would try to still deploy it, but I would rethink that in the context of, now that we have a new situation. So if that's going to still be informative, I don't know, maybe you don't need to know that at this point. So I get part of me also is, what decision is this going to inform a decision? Is this what do you need to know that you don't know right now? These are all the kinds of things that I'm thinking about.
Thanks, John. We have probably time for one more question. I know there are a couple folks that are on the phone rather than online, so I do want to give just a couple of seconds for anybody who'd like to chime in with their voice for any questions that they might have.
And I'm willing to stay on if people have questions. I can stay on.
I'm not hearing anything right now. If you are trying to chime in, you just need to click the off mute button. But we will hang tight for a little bit longer. Thanks for all the thank yous. And just a reminder that, well, first of all, thank you so much, John, for sharing with us. That was really fantastic. I think it was helpful and appreciative. We do have 3 more webinars scheduled for this spring, which hopefully you've gotten the emails from me about already. If you'd like to be added to the calendar invite, just send me an email. I will type it into the chat right now. And you'll also be able to find this webinar recorded, and the slides will be shared with you in our folder as well. Thanks everyone for joining us. Happy Monday. We will hang on here. So if you continue to have questions, feel free to type them into the chat. We'll hang here maybe for 5-10 minutes, John. Does that sound good?
Yeah, great. Yeah.
Awesome. Suggestions for understanding student career interests. Ooh.
Yeah. That actually, there are standard instruments out there around career interest. Those are, I think probably the first place I would look is what's it called? Pair ATIS, ATIS. I don't know what that stands for, but the Pair Institute. They have a database of STEM instruments, and I'm like 99% sure career interest is one of those constructs that they have an instrument for.
I think I found it. I'm gonna type it
Yeah,
into the chat here.
should be pretty, yeah.
How do you recommend evaluating students during a 3-hour field trip?
So I guess I would reframe the question there. Evaluating students, I mean, I guess if the objective, going back to my presentation, if the objective is that they can, conduct a water quality test and and kind of I don't know, to perform some calculations or something like that. That would be probably the kind of, are they able to do those kinds of activities, and do they have enough time to really get to doing them in a way that they feel that they've do they have some opportunity to practice and improve. That it kind of depends on what it is they're doing on the field trip, and but I really wouldn't be evaluating the students. And if I'm assuming this is a field trip where you haven't seen them before, they're dropping in, it's just a class that you haven't necessarily worked with, maybe a teacher you've worked with, but you haven't worked with the students. There's only so much you're going to be able to assess about the students. You don't even know their names, so half the time. So really getting a sense of, is your instruction helping them, is more the focus rather than really evaluating the students per se. That's how I see it, and that's what I think is reasonable.
Awesome, thanks. So how would we do that? Mary, you can feel if you would like to unmute yourself.
Yeah, sorry. Yeah, like that last line you just said there, John, I can't think what you said. You know, obviously we can't maybe test each student's water quality skills, but what is their value in testing in one of these one-off field trips, 3 hours, we don't ever see them again, we don't know them?
Say a little bit more.
You know, students come to us for a one-time field trip.
Right.
Funders, other people often ask us for evidence that we're making an impact. What impact can we truly get a handle on?
Yeah. So I guess I would say, you know, hopefully you're in the student's own life, their development, you're contributing to their development. Now you're not going to be able to see that, right? They're going off, and hopefully that experience is combining with, you know, the trip that their family took to the park that weekend, and it's also combining with maybe some of the social studies that they learned and a book that they checked out of the library, you know. So is it going to have an impact on that student? You know, possibly, maybe, but from your perspective, you're not really going to be, that's really not going to be that knowable. What's going to be knowable is, you know, how well you're working with them in the time that you have them. And that's, and then if it's only for 3 hours, you're not going to change anybody's life, like, in that short
Right. So I
amount of
guess
time.
maybe what you're saying is just what we could evaluate is how is our teaching? Are we using best practices in teaching and that type of thing, which is doable, is somewhat measurable, and obviously would have an impact on students.
We know when kids they're having a great time, they can do things that they couldn't do before. They get access to experiences that they never had. We know what that looks like. We know what good outcomes of that that short experiences are. And we can continue to drive that so that we're getting that for every kid who comes. That's the scope that I think is reasonable there.
Okay. Yeah. I mean, I feel the same way. I feel like it's not necessarily the NOAA, but other funders often push you for evidence on these short-term things. And I just want to push back and say, I can do these pre-post things, but they're meaningless, really.
Exactly. You know, there's no thought behind it, right? That goes back to my first slide like, it's pointless. We can do it. It's evaluation without thinking. So, you know, but it goes back to, you know, if that's what it takes to get the money, it's transactional, but understand that you're not proving anything, you know, and and hopefully, you know, maybe eventually, you know, you can have a good enough relationship with them and say, look, this is not, you know, this is not a good use of your money. You know, I'm spending extra time answering your question that doesn't answer anything, you know, and hopefully you can have a hard conversation like that. More funders are bringing on internal evaluators that hopefully are shaping this kind of thinking.
And I've seen too that if you do have that conversation and say, we're not doing this because of that, that can be effective as well. Thank you.
Thanks so much. If anybody else has questions and they'd like to come off mute and ask them, feel free to do so. That was a really good question, Mary. Thanks.
Yeah.